Actress Diane Keaton has died in California. She was 79 years old. Keaton's family made the announcement but did not specify a cause.
Diane Keaton's death was never as simple as the headlines claimed. Officially, it was pneumonia, but according to the last doctor who examined her, that diagnosis didn't even come close. He said her body showed a biological reaction unlike anything he'd seen in 3 decades of practice. A chain of events that defied every rule of medicine. The report he wrote that night was sealed within hours, and with it began one of the strangest medical mysteries Los Angeles has ever known. Hey, before we dive into this eerie story of Hollywood's beloved icon, if you love exploring the hidden and forgotten stories behind Tinseltown's brightest stars, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We've got more stories like this one waiting just below the surface. Now, let's step back into that cold Los Angeles night. It was the early hours of October 12th, 2025, and a faint layer of fog still clung to the western sky. Inside the basement of Cedar-Sinai Hospital, the air hung heavy, the only sound a quiet hum of fluorescent lights above the stainless steel examination table. Beneath a thin white sheet lay the body of Diane Keaton, actress, director, and one of Hollywood's most enduring legends. Outside the door, the clock read 12:48 a.m. Everything was still. The man seated beside the table, a senior forensic pathologist, stared at the glowing screen in front of him. Test results, lung scans, and blood readings flickered in shades of pale blue across his tired face. The official death certificate had already been signed hours earlier. Primary cause, bacterial pneumonia. No complications, no underlying conditions. A clean, ordinary conclusion. Except the data he was staring at didn't fit that story at all. For 30 years, this doctor had studied countless pneumonia cases, but nothing in Keaton's numbers resembled the condition. Her body wasn't reacting like someone who had succumbed to an infection. Something else was happening. When the sheet was lifted, a soft chill spread through the room. On her left shoulder, the doctor noticed a faint, silvery mark, flat, cool to the touch, and about 7 centimeters long. It wasn't a bruise, nor a surgical scar, nor any sign of injection. Under the harsh light, it shimmered faintly, as if coated in something that reflected light like frost. One of the technicians whispered, "That looks more like new tissue growth than decay." No one answered. The hum of the vents swallowed his words. As they examined the area more closely, they found small, scaly patches spreading across her neck and shoulder, the same region where Diane had undergone surgery decades earlier to remove squamous cell carcinoma, a type of skin cancer. Under the microscope, her cells showed something baffling. Instead of dying, they appeared to be reactivating, as if they were restarting after shutdown. The doctor scribbled a quick note on his pad. Abnormal cellular activation. But an hour later, that note vanished from the official report. When her lungs were opened, the findings only deepened the mystery. The tissue didn't resemble bacterial pneumonia at all. The color was neither red nor gray, but a pale, faint pink, glowing subtly under blue light. Certain spots even emitted a soft radiance. the kind that appears only in living cells, showing active enzyme reactions. One of the young endoscopists watching the procedure whispered, "It's like her body's still trying to heal itself." No one responded. The doctor simply wrote one understated line in his notes: abnormal cellular activation. Possible autoimmune response. It was enough to stop the entire team in silence. Later that night, according to the Los Angeles Times, Diane Keaton's tissue samples were sent to Cedar-Sinai's pathology lab for deeper testing. But just before the analysis was uploaded, the report disappeared. The hospital's internal servers went offline for 45 minutes, and when they came back, the file was empty. Only Keaton's name and a timestamp remained. A nurse on duty, Marissa Lott, later told ABC Local News, "We were ready to send the report, but the file had been wiped clean. Just her name, nothing else." When the supervising doctor learned of it, he paused for a moment and said quietly, "Don't include that in the record." Then he walked out without another word. By morning, the hospital's entire forensic system was locked. Staff received internal emails ordering them to suspend data transfers. 2 technicians were suddenly reassigned, and the rest were told to sign confidentiality agreements. For most institutions, that would have been the end, but in Hollywood, nothing ever stays buried. Hollywood later revealed that Keaton's body temperature hadn't dropped as expected after death. Normally, an elderly person's temperature falls rapidly within a couple of hours, but even 5 hours later, hers remained at 33 degrees Celsius, something forensic experts call a delayed enzyme reaction, usually linked to rare autoimmune or metabolic irregularities. Before anyone could investigate, all related data was locked under family confidentiality. When reporters from People and Variety pressed for answers, Cedar-Sinai issued a single-line statement: "No cause of death other than pneumonia has been identified. We respect the family's privacy." But Los Angeles is a city that lives on whispers. Within days, doctors and medical staff began murmuring about what had really happened that night. The strange glowing tissues, the missing samples, the doctor who suddenly resigned 3 days later. According to the Hollywood Reporter, his parting words were, "That body didn't belong to any pathology I've ever known." That same evening, Diane Keaton's entire medical file vanished from the hospital's digital system. The mystery could have ended there, sealed, buried, forgotten. But in the quiet corners of Beverly Grove cafes, young doctors began to talk again. What if what they saw in Diane's body wasn't simply a reaction to age or illness? What if it was something new, something unrecorded in any medical literature? And so her story was reopened, not to challenge the official cause of death, but to uncover what her body had been silently fighting all along, the unseen conditions that had been with her for decades. That trail led back more than half a century to a Hollywood where health risks were hidden behind bright lights and beauty standards. In the early 1970s, a young Diane Keaton was just breaking through, fresh from Broadway, with that signature charm that would soon make her an icon. But during a routine checkup, a doctor found a tiny dark spot on her right temple. At first, it looked like a patch of makeup. A biopsy, however, told a different story: basal cell carcinoma, a form of skin cancer. Back then, no one on set thought much about UV exposure or protective lighting. Actors stood for hours beneath blazing halogen lamps, sweating under layers of makeup. Diane went through one surgery on her shoulder, another on her cheek. They left small scars, barely visible, but for someone constantly in front of a camera, they were enough to leave deep psychological marks. Afterward, she developed an intense fear of sunlight. Friends recalled she rarely went outdoors in the afternoon, always wearing wide-brim hats, gloves, and long sleeves. Her dermatologist once said her skin reacted to sunlight like a newborn's. A few minutes outside could leave her with burns. The cancer was removed, but its shadow never left her. Through the 1980s, she underwent repeated phototherapy sessions, a cutting-edge treatment at the time. It helped her skin heal, but it also made her cells hypersensitive to light forever. When doctors examined her body in 2025, they found traces of that same condition. Her shoulder tissue showed keratinized patterns identical to those seen in early precancerous lesions. Under the microscope, her cells weren't decaying. They were reawakening, dividing in erratic patterns, as if stuck between regeneration and breakdown. One endoscopist's draft report read simply, "Cannot confirm malignancy, but cannot rule it out." That single line summed up the mystery of Diane Keaton's body, always existing on the threshold between recovery and decline, between life and the quiet surrender of it, amid.
In her final years, those who saw her noticed a transformation. In photographs taken at her Los Angeles home, her skin looked translucent, almost metallic, reflecting light like polished silver. Her manager once said Diane even wore gloves indoors, claiming that the air hurt her skin. A dermatologist from UCLA who reviewed her photos called it extreme light sensitivity, a condition sometimes linked to immune disorders triggered by prolonged UV exposure. But the story of her health didn't end with her skin. It reached deeper, to an old battle she'd once confessed in her memoir, Then Again. She wrote that at 25 she had struggled with bulimia nervosa, a disorder that quietly damaged her body for years. She wrote, "I ate to fill emptiness, then punished myself." For 5 years she lived in that hidden loop of guilt beneath Annie Hall's radiant smile. Medical specialists later explained that long-term bulimia can scar the nervous and immune systems, making the body far more vulnerable to infections later in life. And indeed, public records show that in 2023, Diane was hospitalized briefly for acute bronchitis, though she recovered surprisingly quickly. Still, her breathing weakened afterward, and by 2024 she required nighttime oxygen support. At red carpet events, she appeared graceful as ever, gloved, composed, and smiling through persistent coughing fits. She'd say to reporters, "It's just a little cold," with her usual dry humor. But behind that charm, something inside her was fading. When doctors examined Diane Keaton's lungs, they didn't see the cloudy, infected tissue they expected. Instead, they found small erosions and thickened vessels, signs of a body that had been healing and breaking down at the same time. One of them murmured, "It's as if she fought for too long." The paperwork said pneumonia, but everyone in that cold room knew something else was happening. The most troubling note read simply, "Foreign cell clusters detected. Origin unknown." That line vanished from the official file days later, along with the tissue sample itself. Cedar-Sinai refused to release storage records, claiming patient privacy. A colleague later told Vanity Fair, "Her body reacted like it was still resisting death." From that moment, 3 theories began circulating through Los Angeles's medical circles. 3 possible explanations for what really happened inside Diane Keaton's body.
According to a leaked UCLA report, Diane's final symptoms matched a rare condition called autoimmune pulmonary necrosis, when the immune system attacks the lungs from within. A resident described it as a silent implosion, no fever, no swelling, just a sudden crash of oxygen levels and pulse. In her last hours, Diane was awake and calm, scrolling her iPad, smiling at old interviews. Then her vitals began to fail without warning. Doctors believed decades of treatments, dieting, and immune stimulants had left her defenses permanently switched on. A UCLA researcher said that same system that once saved her eventually turned inward and destroyed everything. The second theory reached back to the early 1980s, when Diane underwent high-intensity ultraviolet therapy for skin cancer scars. At the time, it was considered revolutionary, a beauty miracle. She endured at least 7 sessions under searing blue-white lamps, her skin coated with a photosensitive solution. The treatment worked, but later studies at Stanford showed UV exposure could trigger photomutation, genetic disruptions traveling through the bloodstream to other organs. Some doctors suspected Diane's lungs had begun reacting like light-exposed skin. One UCLA technician told NBC News her lung cells behaved as if they remembered the light. It was a poetic, terrifying thought that the same light which once saved her had returned to take her final breath. Hospital charts showed Diane received a broad-spectrum antibiotic during her final week, yet tests found almost none of it in her blood. Experts blamed the lingering damage from her bulimia in her 20s. Her body simply couldn't absorb medication. The unprocessed drug may have triggered toxic reactions in her bloodstream. A pharmacist told The Hollywood Reporter her plasma showed a high lactate level, like the body was manufacturing its own poison. Doctors called the condition end-stage metabolic reversal, when the body's chemistry turns against itself. None of these theories appeared in the official report. None were publicly confirmed. And yet every one of them hinted at the same unsettling truth. Diane Keaton's body hadn't quietly shut down. It had fought until the very end. Those who visited her in her last months remembered a woman who seemed to fade by choice. Her skin had grown pale and reflective, her voice soft but steady. She told friends the air hurt her, that she kept her house cold because breathing feels easier that way. She still answered fan mail, still sent thank-you notes, and still joked about her gloves and wide-brimmed hats. To the very end, she hid her pain behind grace. Al Pacino later recalled their final call in late September 2025. Diane had laughed lightly and said, "The light feels too bright lately." He said it felt like speaking to someone already half gone. In August, she revised her will, leaving most of her estate to her children, Dexter and Duke, and to a skin cancer research fund. In a note to a longtime friend, she wrote, "I've lived close to light for too long. Maybe peace waits in the dark." When news of her passing broke that October, every outlet repeated the same sterile line: cause of death, bacterial pneumonia. But among doctors and friends, the silence felt heavier than grief. Maybe Diane Keaton didn't simply die of illness. Maybe her body, scarred by decades of light, medicine, and resilience, created its own ending, one that science still can't explain. And perhaps behind the sealed files and vanished samples, that final secret still lingers, quiet, unreachable, glowing faintly in the dark.